Starting something fresh this week. This is the first in a series. I think we'll go for 4 weeks. Title, When Pigs Fly. And, this is a phrase that literally means, or kind of means like, that's just impossible. That's just not going to happen. There's no way that preposterous detail that you were hoping for is going to take place. Like the beginning stages of my crush on Kelly. We celebrated 17 years yesterday, by the way, by zip-lining. And, it's funny because I never thought that I would find my wife that elevated in a tree without panicking completely. It wasn't really the zip-lining part that was terrifying. It was actually walking across those bridges. I don't know if you guys ever been there to Bretton Woods and did the zip-lining, but it is a fun experience. It was a lot of fun. And it was pretty mean of, I'm not going to embarrass you, my daughter Grace, because I had talked to her already about the fact that I was going to do the whole, surprise, we're going zip-lining, Kelly. And then Kelly talked to her, and they, collaborated together to catch me by surprise. Kelly got it first, which was not cool, because I'm always the first to, do stuff. She always gets the last word, but anyway. There are things that we think about, that we dream about, that we hope for, that we say, I hope so, but don't happen, or we don't feel like they're going to happen. We feel like it's impossible. We feel like there's no way. We feel like the idea of it does not make sense whatsoever. If you were to look up that fantastic place that you don't trust in at all, Wikipedia, if you were to look at When Pigs Fly on Wikipedia, this is what it comes up with. It's a figure of speech or a hyperbolic that it describes an impossibility. The implication of such a phrase is that circumstances in question will never occur. That circumstances in question will never occur. That there is no way at all that this could possibly be. That this could possibly be. The fact that more than 8 years ago, I was walking through a Walmart, and my oldest child looks up to me and says, "Dad, Mom's going to have a baby." All right, we had already had 2, and this was a statement about the third, and I'm like, I won't get into the details, but it's just not possible. That's not going to happen. And she's like, yes, it is. And I was like, no, it's not. And, real mature of myself, or us. Anyway, so we went back and forth for a few minutes. Just a couple weeks later, a week later or something, I found out that we were indeed going to have another child. And then, so she then says, it's going to be a boy. And I said, well, there's a whole method to this, Grace. We don't know for sure that it's going to be a boy. And then next thing you know, we're at the ultrasound, and Grace is there. And we're looking at the ultrasound, and, difference between girls and boys. It was very noticeable that he was a boy. And I said, Grace, we're having a boy. And she just looks at me plain as day and says, I told you. I don't know. Anyway. There are things that just seem impossible. This morning, I'm going to say, will it float? Will it float? Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever done that in your science classes or whatever, but you put something in some water and you wonder, will it float? Is it going to sink or is it going to come up? Now, this morning's story is found in the book of 2 Kings, and there's this guy, Elisha, who was with his prophets, these other guys that were creating this space for them to meet, a greater space. This guy was borrowing an axe. The axe head came loose, fell into a river, and the guy's like, oh no, I lost the axe that I borrowed, the axe head. And, I'll read the story in a second, but Elisha walks over, throws a stick in the water, and tells this, the axe head lifts. The guy grabs it and goes back to cutting trees. That just makes no sense whatsoever, because if we ask the question, will it float, an axe head definitely would not float, but God can do what God does. there was a serious situation going on in the book of 2 Kings. There were all kinds of sad realities in the history of the people of God. It was from the death of David and the ascension of Solomon, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Babylonians. Thus, Kings traces the history of two sets of kings and two nations of disobedient people. It was causing all kinds of problems. And the message of the prophets were being rejected. The prophets foretold that the nation's downfall, that it would be they would be carried into exile. And like every prophecy uttered by the prophets and the kings, the word of the Lord came to pass. It also explained that just as God had shown mercy to Ahab, all right, he was willing to show mercy to them. That something would indeed happen that would be significant. If we read through the story here that's happening, terrible things are happening. Things are falling apart. They're going to be carried off to exile. They just keep making bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, and it was costing them big time. But in all of that, though God was explaining to them through the prophets that bad things were going to happen as a result of their rebelliousness, he also promised them that their turning to him and seeking him would also, he would respond in graciousness. Now, don't get it twisted here. He wasn't doing awful things because they were being bad. He was allowing things to happen in hopes that experiencing his wrath and experiencing the negative results of their actions, that they would turn from their behavior and respond to him. His decisions, God's work is always seeking for people, for us to turn to him, for us to respond to his mercy. And so here we are, 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 through 7. And it says this: The company of the prophets said to Elisha, "Look, the place where we meet with you is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan, where each of us can get a pole, all right, and let us build a place there for us to live." And he said, "Go." All right, go. Then one of them said, "Won't you please come with your servants?" "I will," Elisha replied, and he went with them. They went to the Jordan and began to cut down trees. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. "Oh Lord," he cried out, "it was borrowed." If only we felt that way about borrowing things. Anyway, the man of God asked, "Where did it fall?" And when he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there, and made the iron float. "Lift it out," he said. Then the man reached out his hand and took it. The man reached out his hand and took it. I'm just going to ask you some simple questions and make a couple of statements here about this text. What are you believing for? What are you believing for? Now, really, really ask yourself for that. And if you don't have anything like really significant, maybe today, right now, in this moment is a challenge to believe for something big. Now, I'm not talking about self-seeking, self-gratifying, self-promotion kind of stuff. I'm talking about things that matter to God. I'm talking about things that will take you far with God. I'm talking about things that matter to rescuing people from Satan and rescuing people from hell. I'm talking about things that will create opportunity for us to stand out on the streets and do something about poverty and do something about great need. What are you believing for? And are you believing for new territory? Are you moving forward with anticipation of gain of some kind? They had went to do this because they had to create greater space. They had to create more space for them to meet. There was they were growing. The sons of God were growing. These things were happening, and they thought, okay, let's go down to the Jordan River. Let's chop some wood so that we can build a house, so that we can build something where we can meet. The area that they were in, it was too small. So the initial story right here is believing for more. They're creating more space. They're creating more space so that they can work together more, so that they can grow more, so these prophets can mature, so that they can go out and make a difference, so they can go out and share God's truth in hopes to turn a nation. And so they're making this space for greater territory. And despite the season of failure as a nation, they were going to rely on God for more. They were going to reject the fear of failure, and they were going to reject the fear of moving forward. They were going to reject that fear. They were going to believe that God would give them space, that God would give them greater opportunity, greater territory. And so they asked Elijah to join them. You guys read the story as it goes. They asked him to join them. And in doing so, they were needing encouragement, perhaps. There's all kinds of speculation as to why they wanted the prophet there, Elisha, but maybe they just needed some extra morale. Maybe they were concerned that they wouldn't do things right. Maybe they felt that, he would be the right amount of encouragement, the right amount of motivation, the right amount of support. But they asked him to be there. They wanted him to oversee the work. Possibly they needed his prayer. All right? Maybe they thought that they were going to need better direction, or they lacked confidence. For whatever reason, they asked him to join them, and he did. But something happened. The axe head fell into the river. The axe head fell into the river. And setbacks are inevitable. Setbacks are inevitable. And let me ask you right now, what setback are you experiencing? What setback are you experiencing? What is pushed against you? What have you started to believe for? What have you started to ask God for greater confidence, for more territory, for more to be accomplished, for more to happen? How have you began to spread out and say, okay, God, I'm going to go get it. I'm going to do something. I'm going to believe for more territory in my relationships with my family. I'm going to believe for more territory in my experience with my peers in hopes that they respond to the truth that you are real, Jesus. I'm going to believe for more territory in my finances, not for self-gain, but so that I can take care of what I need to take care of, and then even have even more to take care of what others need to be taken care of. What are you believing for more? What are you asking for? How are you asking God to increase? Are you asking God to increase the territory or the capacity of your heart in your marriage? Are you asking God to increase the capacity of your heart for greater love for people or greater love for your children? Now, I understand that some of those relationships, some of those things just seem too far impossible. Are you asking God for more? Are you asking God for more? If you're not, start asking God for more. Start believing that God can and that God will. But when you stand up and start chopping the wood and start moving forward and start doing what God has asked you to do, you should almost expect a setback. Whether God allowed that to happen to, create an opportunity for increased faith, to create an opportunity for us to have to go farther in our trust with Him. Perhaps God allowed it to happen so that we would have to be more diligent about our prayers, be more focused on Him, more focused on not what we want or not what we can gain, but what He is and who He is. Because the blessings that we're after, He's more important than anything that we feel like we need to have. But the axe head flew off. And it sank deep down in the river. They were poor men. These guys didn't have a lot. That's why they borrowed an axe. They borrowed an axe because they didn't have a lot. Now, two things come to mind right away. If they didn't return a borrowed axe, it would damage their credibility. Look at these prophets. They talk about all these things about how they serve God and love God, but they borrowed from us and they didn't give it back. Them are some shiesty men, right? The other thing that could have happened is it was going to stall their progress. They had work to do. We got to knock some trees down so that we can build a bigger place for us to gather and for us to grow and for us to do what God wants us to do. So, we want to do more. We're worried that it'll affect our credibility, but also we lost the axe head. How are we going to continue? How are we going to continue to do the work that God wants us to do? It would stall the process. It would stall the progress. Yeah. and just continuing through the story, we need to focus our prayers. Are your prayers specific? Are your prayers just vague because you doubt? I find it interesting. I'm like, okay, so he asked the axe head to lift, but why did he cut that branch and throw it into the water? Like, what is that? The guys are like, it's right there. He's like, okay, let me get this branch off this tree and toss it in. We've got all kinds of different ideas. I was praying, like, God, what does that even mean? And perhaps one of the reasons is to focus his prayer. Like, I could be asking God for, this metal axe head to float anywhere, but I want to focus my prayer on that one specific spot, that one location. That's where it's at. That's where I need God to do something big. That's where I need God to move in a big way. That's where I am asking God to function in impossibility. Are you focusing your prayers? Are you being intentional? Are you hitting your knees or whatever, asking God, okay, God, I need you to impact my finances. Hey, God, I need you to impact my current job situation. Hey, God, I need you to impact my relationships with my children or my parents. Hey, God, I need you to impact this area of my physical ailment and help me to address my own sickness. Hey, God, I need this specific thing. God knows, but he needs us to be deliberate. He needs us to focus on the situation at hand. He needs us to pay greater attention to just vague statements so that we can focus our prayers and say, God, I need this. This, God, is what I need you to help me with. This, God, is what I need you to do. This, God, is where the issue lies. He was targeting his faith. He was praying with specificity. Proximity was important in asking God for a miracle. Hey, walk around your house if you need miracles there. Walk around the church if you feel like, go ahead and walk around this church. That's a good one. Walk around this church and pray. Walk around this community and pray. Proximity is important. Proximity is important. If you're praying for your kids and they're still living at home, not in a creepy way, but go in their room and stand by their bed in proximity to them and pray for them. Be specific. Be focused. Be intentional. Be intentional. Things are happening. All right? We know the rest of the story, the impossibility. When pigs fly, the axe floated to and was recovered. The axe had floated and was recovered. Those things don't float. They just don't. They don't float. This axe head had no reason to float. I mean, can you imagine the astonishment of the prophets? Like, he cuts the stick branch off and he throws it into the water, even though they had seen, like, some marvelous things. They're like, really? We're going to ask an axe head to get, maybe he threw the stick because he's going to go deep sea diving. I don't know. But he's going to go after this prophet. Maybe Elijah's going to go for a swim. I don't know. But, he asked God to lift that axe head to the surface so that they could recover it. That is absurd. That is absurd, but God did it. And I know, like, initially we want to step back and say, well, that happened then, but could it happen today? That happened then, but could this be accomplished today? I can tell you more and more and more confidently that God has done things that just seem, it's just like, what? That's ridiculous. And even when you don't notice it, it's happening. Even when you don't see it, it's happening. It's happening. God can do amazing things. God can do miraculous things. God can indeed change the situation in a significant and powerful way. I know with relationships it can be hard because how they interact is of critical importance for victory there. But I really believe that God can heal bodies. I really believe that God can change your financial situation. That may require you to get up and go get a job, okay, and do some more. For some of us, maybe it's just a step back. Some of us, getting a job is very difficult. Maybe we're physically unable to, and we need to step back and say, okay, God, I know where my limits are. I know what I can't do, so I'm going to step back and I'm going to believe you, God, that you can indeed change this situation because of what I'm unable to accomplish myself. Some of you need to improve something inside of you. Man, there's something that's dark, that's growing within your soul. There's a bitterness, there's a hatred, there's an envy, there's a sad a spirit that's infested your life, and you need to believe for a miracle. That's something that has attached itself to you that maybe has been there for decades because of a childhood experience. It might have been there for the last year because of something you experienced, and it just keeps growing and growing, and you're like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to weed this thing out of my life. It's always going to be there. This is my thing to carry, and I'll never get through that. You need to pray. Like, God is big. It may be a physical circumstance that he changes. It may be a spiritual need, something that needs to take place right here that he absolutely and completely changes entirely. Things are happening. This victory was ridiculous. But God was concerned with their work, and their work continued. It didn't stop. They got the axe head, and they're like, woo, that was amazing. And obviously, they made sure it was more secure. I mean, as cool as it would be to see the axe head float again, I'm sure that they took the axe handle, and they're like, okay, we've got to make sure that this axe is strong, maybe we need to put another handle on it. I don't know, but they went back to doing what they believed God was telling them to do. They went back to work. So when God does the miracle, don't step back and say, woo, that was amazing. Let me sit and rest. No. Go. Go to what you were initially seeking God to accomplish. Dreams require passion that will put purpose into our daily lives. If we only dream and never act upon it, they will only ever be dreams. The axe head was not recovered on their own strength. They had to rely on God. They had to rely on him completely. Now, one of the most powerful stories of recovering something is the story of Jesus Christ coming to this earth. You see, my own experience in life is that I was definitely drowning. I was suffocating. I had no ability to breathe. I was being, just the waves themselves, and even at times when there wasn't strong waves, when it was just the water, even when it felt like the water was settled, I could not get a gasp of air. And the brutal truth of this is it was during my years in ministry that I had experienced this. It was during my years of doing God's work that I felt like I was overwhelmed with the things that were happening around me, and I was drowning. I wasn't able, in my own strength, to recover. I wasn't able to get on top of the situation. I wasn't able, no matter how much I, prepared myself and, how much of the, lacing up and pulling up my bootstraps and getting up and going for it. It didn't matter. Every single time I tried with my own effort, I just sank deeper and deeper and deeper. I was exhausting myself. I was exerting all of my energy, only fatiguing and not gaining at all. And that's why it is it is not just critical, it is absolute a need for you to ask Jesus for the full rescue. He is the answer, period. In Romans 5:6 through 8, it says, this is in the New Living Translation, it says, when we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people would be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who is especially good. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. While we were still sinners. You know what that means? That means we're a hot mess. We are our own disaster. We're our own undoing. We are our own failures, the sum of our failures, the sum of our deficiencies, the sum of our iniquities, the sum of all the things that we were threw us into whatever abyss that we were trying to climb out of. And just like that, God was like, hey, I love you, and you know what? I love you this much. So I'm going to put you on the earth. I'm going to put Jesus on the earth, and he's going to pull you out of whatever you have found yourself drowning in. He recovered you. He recovered me. That is the greatest act. That is the greatest act, the greatest miracle, the greatest thing could have ever happened. The greatest. Yeah, Elisha's story about an axe head floating on the water, that's pretty fantastic. But a wretched person like myself, damaged and broken and clueless about where I should go and who I should be, suddenly have a person who offers freedom and direction and purpose. Many of us walk through so many things. We're stuck in a rut. So many people are, they're at risk of, they're in danger of gaining the whole world and losing their soul. We have received from God this wonderful gift, this incredible thing, gifts for us to enjoy, gifts not for us to worship. If what he has given us now stands between us, we must once again lay it at his feet. No matter how rich we become, we must always remain poor. We must ensure that while we celebrate the goodness of God, we do not neglect the purpose of God. Let Christ rescue you. Let him be your lifeline. Let him. Yeah, the axe head is cool. But some of us are literally drowning. And we look at our circumstance and we're like, when pigs fly, or even worse yet, when freezes over. Right? When hell freezes over, that's when things will get better. We're such defeatists. We're so defeatist. We walk through life, we journey through life, anticipating trouble, anticipating trauma, anticipating so much difficulty. And yes, you're going to face things, but you have a God who will carry you through those things. Anything, everything. He's got you. He's got you. So what is it? What is it? What are you believing God for? If you don't have something, you got to think of something. What is your setback? What has pushed you? What has kept you? What is keeping you? Focus. Focus. Pray with specificity. Focus. Be intentional. Be intentional. He knows, but you need to know. He knows, but you need to know. He understands, but he needs you to share. He needs you to, in confidence, pray. And you know what? Even when you have great doubt, that might be something that you need more of. Pray with specificity about your own doubts. He can, and he will. He can and he will. There are so many instances in my life that seemed impossible that God just did it. That God just did. Grab it. Oh, man. Grab it. Go for it. Go for it. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for truth. I ask, God, that you would increase our trust in you. God, I pray right now for big dreams. I pray not right now, God, for things that seem impossible, that things that seem absurd. God, that we would pray with focus on what it is that we need from you, God, what it is that we need to experience, or what it is that we need freed from, or what it is that we need in our bodies or in our situation, our circumstance. God, whatever it is that we're facing, whatever dream that we've lost sight of, whatever hope that we lack confidence in, I pray, God, that we would believe again, that we would focus our prayers, and no matter what setbacks come our way, that we would trust that you would change whatever it is that is pushed against us. We would see it. And God, if we're blind to your work, if we're blind to the things that you're doing already, open our eyes, Lord, so that we can indeed see what you are doing. And Jesus, help us to see you, the rescuer of our soul, the one who said to us, who are in the midst of the abyss, or heading there itself, that you, by your command, pulled us up out of that place where we were drowning, where we would not be effective, where we would do nothing but rust and rot. And you called us up out of there, God. Help us to see the power of that, the significance of that. Set us free, Lord, in that truth. The miracle of all miracles. And if we yet to respond, Jesus, invade our hearts right now. Help us to be restless until we rest in you. Amen.